Hi there, I'm David Edgar. I'm an artist and I work in recycled plastics. So I take items like this and I turn them into artworks. It's a lot of fun and you can make some too if you want. We're going to show you today how to do a project from a book that my wife and I did called Fantastic Recycled Plastic. And it's going to be what I think of as one of the creatures from the Plasiquarium, which is sort of an imaginary marine environment of perhaps the not too distant future. We're going to take a bottle that's shaped just like this, and we're going to turn it into what I call a handletail fish. We're going to use the handle portion of the bottle to become the tail. I don't know if you can see that now, but the body of the fish will be over here, and the handle tail will reach out, and then the tail of the fish will be here in this area. Let's get started and we'll show you how to do that. The first thing we want to do is use a utility knife. Always be careful and safe with the use of these very sharp instruments. And the first cut we make is right here, and we dive into the plastic and make our first piercing there. And then we're going to use a pair of tin snips to cut around the outside of this to remove that cap component. So we'll go from this shape to this shape. You can see where I've made some cuts to a same type of bottle, and we've removed the pouring spout and the lid, and we've removed one end and part of the back, and we've removed this little triangular piece from right behind the handle right here. And what we're going to do is next, since we can't really, it still doesn't look very much like a fish, does it? I guess not. So you'll see that I've got one that I've already heat formed, and we use a heat gun, which is a little bit like a hairdryer, and I'll show you in just a moment how we can heat form this cut up bottle into this shape. Guess we don't need that one. And you can see the basic fish shape going on here. This is where the head of the fish will be, and the tail, and a dorsal fish, and the fin and the body of the fish. What we're going to do now is we're going to heat form this. We're going to use a little heat to erase the memory in the plastic. The plastic has a memory. It wants to stay in the shape that it was manufactured in. So you can force this, like I've just done, into a new shape, but if you let it go for a while, it'll eventually go back. So we're going to use what's called a heat gun. You could use a hairdryer at home, and we're going to use a little heat. And since we have this folded open, we're going to apply a little heat in the area we folded it, and that heat is going to erase the memory in the plastic under heat, and then when it cools back down, it'll assume a new memory and stay in that new place. Now, it takes a few minutes, so I've taken the liberties of going ahead and making an already heat-formed armature, so you can see at this point now how the label of the bottle is going to be the dorsal fin, and the bottom of the bottle is going to be the body of the fish. And here's where our handle was, and you can see the handle is extending this fin out, and this right here is where the pouring cap was. And then this was the back of the bottle. So we're taking, this is what I think of as the armature for a handletail fish. And before we've done our detail work, this is more or less how the finished piece looks. Now what we want to do is to cut the dorsal fin with a little bit of detailing. I'm just going to remove this little outside edge because it's excess material we don't need. And it's very important when you're cutting the dorsal fin to cut out a negative space between the different elements of the fin. If you just make cuts, the pieces won't separate visually, and you want them to separate visually. So we'll make a row of these cuts all the way down like so to make the finished piece. And so we're going to move on to some additional parts. We've got a pre-cut head, which we've cut out of some scrap plastic. We have a gill, which is going to go right behind the head, as you can see here. We have a sports drink cap and a soda bottle twist cap, and that'll be a two-part eye. We have made a lot of these detail cuts you saw earlier, And I have a scrap from a plastic bottle. It was yellow, and I think this was a prune juice bottle here, and that's going to be, those two parts together are going to be a kind of a decorative fin element. And we're going to set this head assembly aside for a moment. We want to put the fin component on there first before we do the head. We're doing it with a staple, an electric staple gun, so we've got our fins here, and we're holding them in the place where they'll be. We're using a cardboard pad here to protect the tabletop so you don't put the staple into your tabletop. But one good staple usually will do the trick to hold those fins in place. You can see them that way. Then we use a pair of needle nose pliers and we fold over that staple on the back so those sharp points can't stick anybody, and it also sets that staple and makes that a nice permanent attachment. Now you can see on the back here, I've drilled a hole back here, and I got a piece of copper wire. That's going to be our hanger, and it's going to be attached at the same time we do this eye and head assembly with the gill. These are all of those components together. We put them through a hole right here. It's already drilled in our piece to save time. And then we put our wire hanger over that little screw. And these little machine screws are a lot like the nuts and bolts for erector sets. If any of you remember erector sets, little miniature nuts and bolts. And I'm just using a nut driver here to tighten that up. And we sort of, you can see here, we made the eyes offset, so there wasn't one right in the middle of the other. And so we have the ability to make him look in different directions, sort of. So we're turning it so he's looking forward a little more. And this is just tightening up that screw so that it stays in place. Okay, now, I never liked this, being able to see the hardware through the eye here. I thought that that's kind of doesn't make sense to me. It looks funny. So if you cut a little disc of colored plastic out, and the disc is, you want to make it small enough to fit inside that screw cap, but you want it big enough that the threads of the screw cap will trap it in place. You can pop that in there, and it gives it a colored eye that looks much more attractive. And we have the wires attached to that same screw through the eye in the back, and we've made a crimp here at the balance point, so when we hang it on the wall, it won't wobble. And you had seen earlier where we started to cut this, again using just a good pair of kitchen scissors, and we cut out negative spaces in between to separate these spikes for the fin. And at doing so, it also kind of deconstructs the label graphics so that the brand name doesn't show up quite as much, and the decorative nature of it just sort of becomes decoration. Nice colors of a tropical fish. Now, I think of these colors as focus group approved colors. The manufacturers of these products choose the colors for their packaging very carefully, so you're guaranteed to have a certain amount of appeal to your colored artwork in the future. So this is the finished product, a handletail fish from our book, Fantastic Recycled Plastic. And we've got a copy of the book to show you here, Fantastic Recycled Plastic, published by Lark Books, which is a division of Sterling Publishing and owned by Barnes & Noble, where you can find this, or at any of the online booksellers you might care to find. There's many other projects. I'd like to hear from you and see what kind of things you might make out of post-consumer recyclable plastics, and be excited to know that there's more of it going on out there. Thanks so much for your time today.